Good day. Welcome back to Capsule Math by HannahE. Today we're going to be doing a lesson on integers, and we're going to be learning how to work with positive and negative numbers. My approach could be considered a little different from how it may traditionally be taught, but it's a way that I teach it to hopefully help it to make more sense. Okay. I have a little packet. I'll include the link for that packet in the drop underneath the description of this video. And I created this packet some years ago to help students memorize these rules for how to deal with positive and negative numbers. Now, the cool thing is if you're not much of a memorizer, that's okay, because you can learn how to work the concept of positive and negative numbers without having to memorize anything and get really good at doing them. Okay, so our first example here has 5 plus 7. Now, traditionally speaking, most of you have done that since grade school. You know that if you add 5 plus 7, you're going to get 12, right? Now, what I want you to start doing, though, is you enter into more advanced level math. We no longer think of numbers as just numbers. They're either positive numbers or they are negative numbers. In fact, when I teach math at the upper level, I do not allow my students to refer to a number without telling me if it is positive or if it is negative. Okay? So, I look at this and it is a positive 5. This plus sign is no longer considered a plus sign. That is telling me I'm dealing with a positive 7. So, I have a positive 5 and a positive 7 here. So, if I look at this on a number line, the number line kind of helps us to make sense of what is happening here. So, I'm going to come over to the 5 because that is my starting place. Okay? Now, this says for me to continue moving in the positive direction. So I'm going to make 7 more hops in the positive direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which should put me at positive 12. So let's review. We've gone to the positive 5. That represents the first number. Then this positive 7 tells me to continue going in the positive direction on my number line to get to the positive 12. Now your positive direction moves to the right. So positive moves right. Negatives move left. Okay? Now, let's see what happens if we're adding two negative numbers. Now, I'm going to adjust my camera a little. It'll give me a little more board space on this side. And I want to look at what happens when we add two negative numbers. So, example 2. Excuse me, I've been a little ill. All right, so we have negative 3 plus a negative 2. Now, this is where adding positive and negative numbers takes sort of a turn. We haven't really talked about, up until this point in math, what to do when you have two negative numbers, because we're used to looking at numbers in the positive. Okay? So in grade school, you only work with positive numbers until maybe 5th or 6th grade if they start to introduce it that early, depending on the curriculum. All right, so here we go. Some curriculums don't introduce this until 7th and 8th grade, so it doesn't, it just depends. All right, so you have positive 1, positive 2. Now this time, we're going to put some values over here on the negative side of our number line. So I've got negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, 9. And because I'm slightly OCD, we cannot stop on 9. We're going to stop on negative 10. Okay. So, here we go. Our first number tells us to travel on this number line to the negative 3. That is our starting point. So we come to the negative 3, and that's where we're starting. Okay? Now, this positive tells us to keep going. Okay? Which direction do I need to keep going, though? It says negative 2. So it tells me to continue going in the negative direction 2 more. So I'm going to go 1, 2 to the negative 5. So my answer here becomes a negative 5. Okay? So, when we add two positive numbers, the answer is always positive. When you add two negative numbers, the answer is always negative. The tricky part comes in when you're adding positive and negative numbers, and we're going to look at those and see what happens when you have to mix it up. Okay? All right. I'm going to adjust my camera just a little so I get more board space over here, and then we're going to look at what happens when we mix this up a little bit. So it's pretty straightforward. Two positive numbers added together equal positive. Two negative numbers added together equals a negative number. Now let's see what happens when we switch things up. Okay? So, this is super, super duper important what I'm about to teach you, because when we get a little further in the integer rules, things will sound a little differently. So, pay attention very carefully to the instructions for adding and subtracting when we get there. Okay? All right, so here we go. Let's see what happens when we add a positive and a negative number. So let's start with an example that looks like this. Let's say we have 15 plus a negative 8. Okay? Actually, let's go a little smaller than that. Let's do, we'll make this a little smaller too. Let's do 9 plus a negative 5. Okay? I want to keep these underneath 10 in value, okay? Just so we have a little moving room. All right, so here we go. We got our number line again. I used to have a handy dandy tool that will put a number line up on the board for me. I don't have that tool anymore. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have -1, -2, -3, -4, and -5. Okay, so what does our instructions tell us to do? Our instructions tell us to go to the positive 9 as our starting point. Okay, so we're going to start at positive 9. Now, this plus sign tells us to keep going. That's all that means. Just keep going. But it says to go -5. So, what happens when we need to go negative? Well, remember when we're going positive, we move to the right, correct? Now, when we're moving negative, we need to move back to the left. So, we're going to go this way, which it may be flipped on my camera. I forgot that sometimes it mirrors it, but just keep in mind when you're doing this, positives move to your right, negatives move to your left. So we're going to come back on this number line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and look there, we stopped at positive 4. Now, another way of looking at this problem is the same as saying what? Think about it. 9 minus 5 gives me a positive 4. Okay? So instead of saying minus here, we're actually saying 9 plus a negative 5 gives me a positive 4. Okay? So this minus sign does not mean minus anymore. It means negative. Which direction am I moving on this number line? That is what these signs represent. Okay, now let's look at what happens. And I really want to do this example right underneath, so let's see if I can squeeze it in here, because I want to compare this for you. Let's say we have a negative 9 plus 7. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use the same number line because I want to demonstrate to you what happens here. We're going to go ahead and draw this out a little further. 6, -7, -8, -9, -10. Okay, so for this particular problem, and I'm going to rewrite this because I want you guys to see this a special kind of way. So let's say we have 7 plus a negative 9. Okay? Yeah, let's do it that way first. So the positive numbers is shown first. All right, so what does this tell me I need to do? All right, I'm going to use a different color. Let me see if I can get green here. I'm going to use green and see if you can pick this up on the video. Hopefully this is close enough. Hoping that this video, I want to pull this in a little bit actually, because I want to make sure that you can see this very, very clearly. Okay. So my first number tells me where I'm starting at, correct? So I'm starting at the positive 7. Now my second number tells me how many hops I'm going to be making. The negative sign in front of it tells me if I'm moving left or right, which since it's negative, it means I need to move left. So I'm going to make 9 hops in the negative direction. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And it stops me here at negative 2. Okay? So, what happens? We have 7 plus a negative 9. Could we say that this was the same thing as saying 9 minus 7 equals 2, but we took the sign of the bigger number? Yes. So, when you see these, where you have an addition problem with a positive and a negative, you just subtract the two numbers and take the sign of the bigger number. Okay? So when you're adding a positive and a negative, you subtract the two numbers and then take the sign of the bigger number. So we're going to do a couple examples of this and do it with bigger numbers than that will fit on a number line so we can see how that will work. Okay? Now I'm going to adjust my camera a little. All right. So example 4. So this time I am going to make this with, oh, I got a glare. Let's see if I can get rid of that glare. Oh dear. That made it worse. Hold on. I think the glare is actually on my board. Okay, let me try one thing and see if this gets rid of it. If it doesn't, we're just not getting luck. Hopefully, I got rid of it. Yes, thank goodness. Okay, so we have example 4. All right, so this time I'm going to put the negative number in the front, and I'm going to show you it doesn't matter. Okay, so let's say we have negative 8 plus 5. Let's go ahead and do a number line for that one real quick, and then I'm going to show you how to do these when you have numbers that are too big to go on a number line. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. -1, -2. I one time had students ask me, how do I manage to keep these numbers pretty evenly spaced? And I was telling them that when I was growing up, they didn't really have graphing paper. You had to create your own graphs. Now, that's the story my parents told me. I do think they had graphing paper, but my parents couldn't afford it. And so I was always drawing these graphs out by hand. And so I learned to get really, really good at drawing graphs. Anyway, just a funny little tidbit. Okay, so the -8 here tells me that I'm going to start at -8. So I go over to the -8. The plus sign tells me I'm going to be moving, but which way am I moving? This is going to be moving in the positive 5 direction. If it does not have a negative sign in front of it, you automatically assume that is a positive number. Okay? So if it does not say negative, it is positive. Okay? So that means I need to move back to the right 5 paces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which hops me off at -3. Okay? Now, using our little trick we talked about, we could subtract these two numbers. We would have gotten 8 minus 5 equals 3. But what was the sign of our biggest number? Negative. So we just put the negative sign in front of that. Okay? So that is how you do it if it will not fit on a number line. When you have a positive and a negative number, and you're adding them, you subtract the two numbers and take the sign of the bigger number. Every time, that is how it works. If we were to plot 100 and something, say 122, plus a negative 150, you would go 122 to the positive on the positive side of the number line, and then plot all the way back 150 something to the negative. Okay, so it will work out even if you don't plot it on the number line. But this is how you get to it if you don't have a number line or the numbers are too big to fit on a number line. Let's try a couple examples using that so you can see what I'm talking about. Make sure you can see. I'm going to step off camera a little more so to make sure that you can see what is happening here. So let's say I have a negative 54 plus 37. Okay, so I'm going to take 54 and subtract 37 from it. You can do this on your calculator. All right, so I'm going to put 17 as my answer. Now I've got to check my two values. Which one had the bigger number? The 54 did. Which one had which of these two was bigger? The 54 is bigger than the 37. What's the sign for the 54? It's negative. So my sign of my answer should be negative. All right. Now, let's look at another example of that. Okay. Hopefully we can still see that. I'm right in the middle of that glare spot again. And I think it's coming from the sunlight, so it's not much I can do about it. Okay, so let's say we have positive 65 plus a negative 25. Okay. All right. So one thing I used to teach my students to do is to look at the two numbers and go ahead and determine the sign of the answer. Well, 65 is bigger, so I know it's a positive. Remember, if it does not have a negative, it is always positive. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a little plus sign here because I know my answer is going to be positive. So then I do 65, 65 minus 25, and I get 40. So my answer is a positive 40. Okay? So, again, very simple. And this is all we need for adding positive and negative numbers. Thank you very much for your attention on this lesson today.